Good. I started recording, so
Sure.
and again, it's nothing that we have to put on the air. I just do this because people often want a record of it, and that way it's simple. And then if it's a good conversation and we both want to share it, then we do. But other than that, it stays private. About half of them are willing or want it on the air, and the rest don't. So it's totally cool.
Sure. Yeah. No, I never know what could come out of my mouth. So yeah, we'll see how we go.
So tell me a little bit about yourself. I read what you wrote on the appointment thing.
Australian, Queensland, Australia, and yeah, born and raised Jehovah's Witness. Left at about 15 years old, and partly putting a bit of meaning to life ever since, or putting it back together and things like that. And a family does a good job of initiating or really starting to bring that together for motivation and that. So a big part of that's been having a little family of my own and not having to worry about someone more than just myself.
Yeah.
So I've got siblings who are still Jehovah's Witnesses, older sister and a little brother, and my parents have both left.
Really?
Yes, they both left slowly over the last 10 years, I'd say.
Okay.
And and an older brother who left a long time ago as well. Okay. And so it's not a belief system I view favorably, that's for sure.
Yeah. There's a fair number of it's a fairly significant African American population in Jehovah's Witnesses. They work my neighborhood just about every Saturday morning. And yeah, it's an interesting sect.
Absolutely. What does the broader Christian world see them like? Because I consider them, if you leave, they're generally an atheist factory. Like, they teach you to disbelieve in every other belief system in the world. So when you can throw theirs away, you're left with nothing, pretty much.
Wow.
And that's a real big problem I see with a lot of people getting out who are adults.
Yeah.
Where looking back, I'd had one foot in two worlds through friends at school.
Yeah.
So by the time I'd left at 15, I had a whole different world I was sort of able to just walk into, with people I'd grown up with all through primary school, and then through to high school and things like that. And but others aren't as fortunate; they're more isolated. And my friends who were in the church, who are my age, we shared the same social group at school.
Yeah.
So we were able to organize to do things together, and then go and do those things with our friends from school in like a real sneaky. And I found that we had less of an issue going into the world, as Jehovah's Witnesses would call it, and meeting people and starting a life, where some leave and they've got nothing. Strange, they're just some people they might talk to at work or something.
Yeah.
And I've seen it. Yeah, it just destroys people at times.
Yeah, it's the way a lot of other Christians regard Jehovah's Witnesses. So even though not a lot of Christians understand creeds, the ancient Christian creeds for many Christians kind of define the boundaries of the church. And so what that usually means is Trinitarian theology. And the more you dig into Jehovah Witness beliefs, the more you begin to see how basically its origin story, how in the 19th century, and there are a whole number of millennialist movements in the 19th century. That's different from the millennials, the generation, but millennialist movement in the 19th century, where in this burned over area in upstate New York, people said, well, I'm going to read the Bible without any filters, literalistically for the first time, and find out what the Bible really says. And then out from that springs Jehovah's Witnesses, Latter-day Saints, Millerites, that became the Seventh-day Adventists, and then other groups, even the Oneida community, which was just a fascinating community. But they all kind of sprung up in that same time, in that same place. And Trinity wasn't one thing that did well amongst those groups. And same with Jehovah's Witnesses, or same with Latter-day Saints. the Mormon Church. So most Christians kind of look at the Jehovah's Witnesses and to say, yeah, we're gonna, they come to our door, and we appreciate the fact that many of them try to live moral lives, and we appreciate the fact that they're sincere, and some groups of Christians really want to just kind of go toe to toe. And sometimes if they come to my door and they're really pushy, then I'll say, okay, come on, so I'll play your game. And and then they're a little surprised that I know what I know, but the conversations usually don't go real far. And so and I've had members of my church who had parents and such who were Jehovah's Witnesses, and like you said, often people who come out of it don't have a lot of good to say about growing up in it.
No, there's a lot you miss out on that, depending on, I guess, in the individual. But for me, it affected playing sports outside of school time and socializing in those ways, and which I enjoyed. I was an athletic kid. I enjoyed playing sports. So played it through high school, which most of the games were through school time. So I, did those things, but that was a big catalyst in me leaving. I put an ultimatum at 15 years old to my parents and said, football or I leave home. And I got to play a year of football for the first time that I begged them my whole life at 16 years old, played one season of rugby league, one of the national sports we have over here. And it was a dream come true for me, but, it took basically 10 years from like the age of 6 of negotiations to finally get to do it. But
so then you became an atheist. And
I was one of those legendary lot that watched a Zeitgeist and was converted as like all our doubts confirmed. And from then on, it was game on for the militant atheist phase, as a lot of people like to call it. Yeah. And it's just any chance you get to have that conversation and call people out on their so-called ridiculous beliefs, you don't tend to make a lot of friends that way. Thankfully, I've got a good lot of people around me that it doesn't really care what we say to each other in that regard.
Wow. So then you somehow bumped into Jordan Peterson, and how did that happen?
Yeah, I've been quite agnostically minded for the last 5 or 6 years, especially, and Joe Rogan's podcast has been a big influence on me, I'd say, and come through there, and just found I had a knack for seeing that certain things would happen in the media in regards to the political correctness and all that, and you could kind of see who was about to be the next podcast guest through the lot of podcasts that would happen. That Jordan Peterson came along, and then there was the bloke who tweeted about on International Women's Day or something like that, I think it was, and he ended up on Dave Rubin and Joe Rogan, and I forget his name, Colin something, and Colin Moriarty or something like that. And just sort of got into it through the political correctness and side of things, because I see the Jehovah's Witness as a very kind of a case in point for me for a politically correct in their own way of living, where if you step outside the lines, there's punishment socially, familial, through in the family even. And it's so I guess those things I picked up on growing up in a church, I can see that through the lens of political correctness, and just got interested. And I was put off because I've been put off by Christianity through being raised as a Jehovah's Witness, and very quite hostile towards it. I have been, and then was even like put off watching the biblical lectures for a while. Wasn't until I actually finished the Maps and Meaning lectures and the personality ones, and was like, all right, let's give this a go. And by the second lecture, I was like, yeah, all right, there's something here. And even by the second lecture, which was after he'd done like the giant introduction, which he never really got around to actually doing properly, but that's kind of the charm of the whole thing.
Yes.
And it was from that phenomenological angle, which I didn't realize that's sort of how I'd viewed the world myself. And there was just through like Jonathan Pageau's, or as I would call him being Australian, the Padge. And he's and just seeing patterns and things like that, and that's just how I've seen the world my whole life, and it's just clicked a few things into gear, and I've gone from having a couple of books on my shelf to I've read about 80 books in the last 12 months, let alone audio books, and it's just I'm ADHD or whatever. I was medicated as a kid for a short period of time. My parents didn't like the little zombie that the medication gave them. They went, nah, give us the little lunatic. We'll deal with him. And for better or worse, here I am. And yeah. So yeah, like I read tangentially. So at the moment, I'm partway through about 4 or 5 books, and I try and make myself finish a book at the end of each week. By the end of each week, so I'm at least crunching them over time, getting them done. So I'm partially through Pavel Florensky's At the Crossroads of Science and Mysticism, and a introductory book to Eastern Orthodox theology by Andrew Luth.
Okay.
Are the 2 main ones I'm sort of trying to smash through. They're not big books. They're about 200 pages each.
Okay.
But it's just tough with kids running around. I've got 2 kids at home who are 5 and 3. One's they're out at the moment. One's gone to kindy for the day, and the other one's out with mum at the park or something.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Kids are an enormous blessing, and they grow us up. They
do or die for sure.
That's true. It's true.
I've got a 9-year-old daughter as well who's an absolute card. She's at school at the moment, and I enjoy having my little family and good stuff. And yeah, now I guess part of it is chucking the old cross over the shoulder and walking up that hill.
Yeah.
Now where I'm at, I've got things to look after.
Yeah.
It's not a place here in Queensland, Australia, at least in the city where I live, where you can go and do lots of manly things out there. So it's a matter of being as a stay-at-home parent. Has been a bit of a battle of masculinity, I guess, or battling with it, not having I'm digressing, but I used to build houses a lot most of my working life. Mm-hmm. As a carpenter's labourer. My family are carpenters. My dad, both brothers, and my brother-in-law were all carpenters. Mm-hmm. So I did that a lot and worked in pubs. But I've lost my train of thought. But
well, you were talking. Well, you mentioned your stay-at-home husband, and so you're raising the kids.
Yeah. But, just through happenstance, I lost my job 2 years ago, and she had an opportunity to go straight into a full-time job, basically, and. We just went with what was thrown at us, and I've learned a lot. Like our 5-year-old has autism, and that's been a big.
Wow. Is boy or a girl?
Boy, little boy
with autism. Oh yes. My! And, is he speaking?
He's started to speak in the last 2 years. It's built up to now he's talking in sentences.
Wow.
And, which he was non-verbal. 2 years ago, he might have counted 1, 2, 3, and only we would sort of understand him.
Yeah.
And now he's at kindy, and he's a very smart kid. Like he could count and do his ABCs by just over 3 years old, and things like that, and which was well above what his sister and a lot of his other surrounding cousins and family members were doing. Besides that, he wouldn't talk, but it's with the Jordan Peterson's stuff with the myths and the archetypes, and I've seen with it, when he was non-verbal and starting to talk, he wouldn't say he was angry. He would go, Hulk smash. That's how he would say he was angry. And to me, when I've read Joseph Campbell and a lot of those sort of people, and Gene Gebber, and I see that as sort of how man might have once got angry, and he's just like, Thor! I could just see there's a little mything in action, you might call it. And now it's I'm mad or I'm angry, but if he gets really, really lit up, it's still arms come up, just Hulk smash, and that's when it's business.
But
yeah,
that I mean, that we had a family in the congregation when I first got here that was 21 years ago. Their little boy was autistic, and they, it was about 2 when the doors kind of closed, and then, he's in his 20s now, and he's still not verbal, and he never will be. But and I've had other members and people in the church with autistic children. That's a big challenge. It's a full-time job for you, just that one little boy, in many ways, I would imagine.
yes, yeah, no, it is, and it does change a lot. It was different experience as a parent. None of the things that are the expectations of how things unfold happen. Yeah. So it's a constant challenge to yourself and your ego, really, as well. And I've described, like, as he's learning and I'm learning who he is, and he's an ever evolving Rubik's cube. And as soon as you get to sort of that last click, it's a whole new shape and it's a whole new stage to learn. And he learns and we learn along with him. But yeah, I can also understand when people say I wouldn't change him for the world as well. Change them for the world, and that's my little dude, and he's great. Yeah, and he's a very loving little guy too. Yeah.
How is the support in Australia? I mean, do you get much support from? Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you got the usual red tape. You got to go through the paperwork to fill out, the phone calls to make, but it's doable for being and if you can afford to pay privately, you can. It's easy too. It's I wouldn't complain being in Australia with many things in regards to that. There's lots of help over here for many things. Yeah.
Wow. That's a big deal. That's a big deal.
It's definitely changed the way I've approached many things, and that reigniting that sort of interest in the phenomenological sort of way of viewing things, because I'm constantly thinking of how he's perceiving the world and things like that. And it's just like I've said through Jordan Peterson, Jonathan Pageau, and even David Bentley Hart's The Experience of God book. Was pretty big, because it clarified a lot of my issues with materialist science, because it's through the topic of consciousness really that I've come through, like, got my interest in Peterson's lectures was through the angle of consciousness. Okay. And that's where, like, the materialist view, the way they tend to put it with the consciousness is the brain state, or the brain state creates the consciousness, where I think inverting that immediately makes it make a lot more sense, where consciousness is what's doing that to the brain. For me, it just lets me move forward from that, instead of it just being this constantly hitting up against it. Right. And then I can make more sense of it. From that point of view for myself anyway. And I find that inverting a lot of their things that they actually hit, the walls they hit, I have more luck just with my own thinking moving forward with them. Even with Daniel Dennett's views of, as he likes to call it, with evolution, it's universal acid, and it's going to eat through all these different ways we've seen the world. And immediately reading his book, it ate through what he was said, like the universal acid and metaphor does that exactly what he's presented, and it eats it. It eats itself. Yeah. And and he likes to invert a lot of people. He openly says it. Where I find people who invert things allow the work to speak for itself, as opposed to, look at what I'm doing. I'm so clever. I'm inverting Hume. Stroke of the beard. And I'm just like, well, why don't you invert Hume, and then let's see who can figure it out and see how clever you are with it. But he likes to let you know who he's inverting and how clever he's doing it. And, and the thing is, I like his stuff. I just don't follow. I can see almost each step of the way for myself where he goes wrong. Okay. And I assume he's a much smarter person than I am, so that's where I get also interested in ideas and how they shape the whole, where you end up with your thought tracks.
Now you mentioned, so are you worshiping with an Orthodox church? Have you gone that far? You're interested in this?
There's literally a Greek Orthodox church 400, 500 meters down the road that I just haven't got to yet. I just, I sometimes think that, like, the belief part of me is broken. That I just can't. I believe in God.
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't wrapped my head around Jesus. Huh. I'm one of those people that I was quicker to believe in God before I would. When I was an atheist, I was one that was as far as like Jesus was about as real as Mickey Mouse, and so I'm not. I've guess at the moment Jesus is in Buddha zone, in that a person that taught people beautiful things, but I'm past that. It's a mystery to me, and I love it. Like that's where I'm at with it. It's the one thing that's challenged every preconception I've built since my whole life. I can't get my head around this bugger's mystery.
It's interesting that's a place that you struck when your backstory is a Jehovah's Witness, because part of what, say, the rest of the church looks at the Jehovah's Witness church about is exactly the person of Jesus. Because for Jehovah's Witnesses, it's an adoptionistic, it's in the spirit, Jesus wasn't the Logos.
No, Jesus was the incarnation of the Archangel Michael.
Right.
To Jehovah's Witnesses. Yeah.
Right. And so it's interesting that for you, in terms of the God part, well, that wasn't too hard, but the Jesus part, the thing about us is that we really are mysteries to ourselves, and the stuff that happens in life, even when we're in a moment and we think we're like in charge of our thoughts and ideas and beliefs, not so much. Mm-hmm. And I have that, I've talked to many people who get to a point and they're like, well, I kind of think I want to believe, but I just don't. And that's true about belief, that we don't really choose our beliefs. We don't get up one day and say, I'm going to believe in this. Well, it's not how belief works. It kind of bubbles up from below. Yes. And so that's really interesting that for you, given your story, this is where you're at. That's interesting.
Yep. Yeah. And then, because it's I'm finding it, one of the struggles with it is there's kind of what I want it to be. And then there's also what I don't want it to be, which is my fear is the Skyman material, the basically the inverse of the materialist view, but with God and Jesus. But then I also don't buy the more Gnostic side of things, where he never actually did incarnate, or and it's a state of mind that you get into, and that where I'm lost in there, somewhere in between there with it all, and it's the symbolism that I find in the Orthodox, I'm getting the most headway with it, and how. Because I see I would call it symbolic cognition, and it's as real to me as any other part, seeing patterns in the world and things like that. Like it's as real as to my experience. So the whole that them being real, that's not something I have a problem getting my head around. But I don't think Jesus is just a symbol,
right?
In that sense, like there's more to it,
right?
And I really enjoy that. Finding that there was a part of Christianity that in a sense openly is mapping the conscious human experience. Yeah. Which I got a handle on when I got into a little bit of Buddhism and reading books and meditating, and I found it was soft. I've seen and immediately open to the ridiculous social justice warrior stuff. There's a whole part of Buddhism, engaged Buddhism, which it's the whole activist side of things. And from my readings into Buddhism was that stuff that you would move along from. Like you wouldn't get involved in that because it's the petty, individualistic, selfish, like I want to change the world before changing yourself, really. And so Buddhism, I moved on from personally because I felt it was soft. There's nothing there underneath it. It was wish-washy in the Western sense, that is. Like I did get the sense of the richness of the traditions elsewhere, but they're not my traditions in a sense. So there was a sort of a foreign interest in it, and where I decided to look more into why I held the views I did about why do I like Western civilization and things like that. And that's sort of one of the reasons why I also started to read and got into Stoicism and that through Marcus Aurelius and started to do that. I used Stoic practices, the CBT techniques to quit cigarettes a year ago. About a year ago, almost to the day, I quit smoking. And in the immediate sort of 2 days from quitting smoking, I had 2 days that I basically couldn't get out of a flow state for 2 whole days. And all I did was start off each morning was to work out and do the dishes and clean up the house, which were things I wasn't doing properly. So just stepping up to the plate, making these adjustments. I spent they changed my life. Like I was saying afterwards that like if I was religious and this happened, you'd got me. You got me. And if it was a full-blown religious experience of just the clarity I felt. I was reading a book on the topic of chaos mathematics, and there was a stage reading it in those couple of days where a few things sort of clicked in the sense of what my understanding of chaos mathematics is. It's the complete bogan, which is the redneck version of Australian. In Australia is a bogan, and it's the bogan version of chaos mathematics I've at least got a grasp of. But just the clarity I felt in those 2 days also is a big part on why I've ended up where I am in the questions I'm asking, because I'm kind of trying to explain what happened to me those 2 days, because it's more than what I've been able to piece together with the materialist point of view that I held for quite a while. Too many anomalies, as Kuhn might say, have accumulated for there not to be a shift into something else. And in a sense, it's kind of terrifying.
So did you make this shift before or after you were married?
I'm not married yet. I'm living in sin.
Oh, okay. Well, before or after you started living with the woman who is the mother of your children, because you've got a lot of commitment for each other without being married. Yes,
we're engaged, and we'll be getting married. But we've been together for 8 years.
Okay. So she's been watching you go through this transformation.
Big time. She's watched me the whole.
And what does she think of it?
She's really and likes the changes that have happened.
Okay.
Like and because I'm a lot harder on myself than she is, and she, like, instead of me like saying I'm changing, she'll also say you're also refining your better qualities as well along the way.
Oh, good.
And which is good. It's the improvements tend to come in hindsight.
Yeah.
Like which is, I've got no problem with that. Like you look back a few months, or for me a year ago, I was drinking, not heavily, but more than I'd like to, given like just my family's history, and smoking cigarettes, chain smoking, and just wasn't, my priorities just weren't where they were, and just feeling frustrated, angry at times, and it just had to make some changes and just a couple of small shifts. It was literally doing my housework and starting to exercise, and it just went from there. And it's been really good. I would say overall over the last 12 months, especially, it has been, and I look forward to where it takes me. I really am. It's Christianity is a bit of a friggin' rabbit hole that I wasn't expecting to have to encounter again. I thought it was dealt with. So it's humbling, because I did have my mind made up about Christianity, God. It was done. And
no, what exactly did you have your mind made up about? I mean, which aspects?
Yeah. I thought I was extremely clever by discounting Skyman, because that's basically the version you get from Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah.
And there's enough, I'm fascinated enough in history to go back to 2,000 years, and there's enough skepticism for me to confirm my own wants, because the way I see it, I didn't like the way I was raised, and it was a rebellion against that, and that's what I had to discard, and I have, but that's not what is. By discarding that, I didn't discard the strongest argument for what I thought I was throwing out, and that's been a big thing. I have consciously tried to tackle the stuff that makes me uncomfortable. In like, that does challenge me in that sense, and that's not easy for anyone. I don't think is sort of go with that challenge of, if I have a response to someone or something of like, I've tend to try and follow that a little bit and see where that takes me, and that tends to take me into things that challenge my beliefs and perceptions, and it's a little bit addictive at times, to be honest. Is having that. I enjoy learning new things, and when you try and make yourself live up to that, it's not as easy, but it's definitely more exciting.
Yeah.
And your own videos, I come across from just someone commenting in a Jordan Peterson clip or something, and said, "Oh, this guy's putting out videos." I was like, "All right," YouTube's your name, and went from there. And at first, it's just like, "Oh, this is just a Christian talking about Peterson." Click. And then because I've clicked on one, and it come up in the feed more and more, and then it's just the topics got me, and then it's what gets said, and it's like, okay, this isn't what I thought I was discarding. And then it's been great. I've enjoyed your content, and how you have been breaking down Jordan Peterson has been helpful as well. And your chats with just the people you have on your show have been a lot of help for me. Of some, just feel like you're getting in a rut, and I was like, oh, where's this going? And then it might just be something you mentioned, C.S. Lewis and the Inklings or something. And next, I've Googled that, and it's like, oh, they've this whole club of these blokes that went to the pub, had some drinks, spoke about some ideas. This just basically described what I would do every Friday if I could. It was just go have some drinks with my favorite people. And let's shoot the shit.
Yeah.
And
talk about important things, and not, something more than just what's happening in sports or politics, but things that are consequential. Yeah.
And like, that's funny, like, because it seems to be a pub or things like that they did it at. And I, being Australian, I have quite an appreciation for the pub, and I regard
especially
it as,
now that you're not a Jehovah's Witness.
Yeah,
you go there as a Jehovah's Witness.
That's right, and it's I see it as the forgotten institution, to be honest, especially in English. I'm not sure about America so much, but in England, in the English culture in Australia, it's like I've gotten jobs from the pub. I've met people. I met my wife, my future wife, at the pub. Lives are saved at the pub by just conversation. Like, I've worked behind the bar. I've seen the state people can walk in and just emotional state that is, and then it just I'm sure that I've got an idea that I've been percolating in my head for a long time. I'd love, if I could, do a documentary about anything. To be honest, it'd be about the institution of the pub in Australian culture. And that the pub, we've also got things called sports clubs. So like our junior sport teams generally have like a drinking facility nearby to help fund the sports clubs and things like that. So we have lots of different drinking institutions around in our culture that just, I consider it kind of a secular church for a lot of people. They get what you would get from a church from the pub.
Yeah, the bartender's the pastor.
Sure, big time. And it's definitely something that's been, in a sense, under attack in the politically correct environment here in Australia. Is
really
because it's a harbor of toxic masculinity. Like going to the pub and let's go pick up girls and this, or like it's
A
toxic.
harbor of toxic masculinity. That's hilarious. But
That's-
I believe it. I can understand how that would. Well, it's, the pub. It's funny because it's that third space, and you're right that America in some ways, I think early on, especially out of New England, which was of course Puritan, the the church became the third space for a lot in America. And in terms of my life, because I don't drink, I'm not an alcoholic. I've never got into drinking, but the church was that third space for me. And, Starbucks, the coffee shop is kind of becoming, a politically correct third space, because out east, you had the corner bar, and the corner bar was kind of the pub, but it was mostly masculine. It was often seedy, and then it kind of had, women needed their own third space. And so, they had to kind of construct that, which sometimes was church or just, the playground or the PTA or something like that. But it's interesting. But, Lewis and his Inklings, very, very British. And so the Bird and the, I forget the name of their pub. Someone's going to take away my C.S. Lewis card by forgetting the name of the pub. But the Bird and the Baby is what they called it, but that wasn't the name of the pub. But no, that's really interesting. That's really interesting.
Our pubs tend to be more taken care of than our churches. You might
really.
They're even more well designed. Some of our pubs are ridiculous. Like they're 4 stories high. There's accommodation.
Really?
Australians have thought about this. We've got one floor will be like pool tables, another floor will be for food and have a bar there. Then another floor is just for drinking. Then another floor will be accommodation where maybe the publican who runs the place will live, but also like workers passing through will stay there. It's
wow.
They've served as like our pubs generally have partially evolved along the old highways. So our towns, you're not a town here unless you've got at least a main street with a pub. Like you could have a main street with a pub and a post office and 2 houses, and you've got a town. Or you could have a street with 100 houses, no pub and a post office, and you're just a place with houses. You haven't qualified as a town. There's certain unofficial requirements, I'd say. And the pubs were like the roadhouses of America. In Australia, they very much served as a roadhouse that have accommodation, food, and drinks for your passes through. And a lot of pubs have died because we're building bypasses of the old highways, and we're building super freeways that bypass everything. So all these towns are dying along the east coast of Australia at the moment over the last decade to 20 years, where we're bypassing all these places you used to drive through, and the whole business was people coming through the towns and things like that. So there's a bit of a shift there actually now I'm thinking of it. And then,
So then what are you left with? McDonald's and hotels? I mean, like in America? That sounds like a downgrade.
It is happening. It's that Australia has definitely Americanized itself. We like to think of ourselves as the smarter little brother, where in Great Britain's the parents, and you guys left home and did your thing, and you forged out a great path of your life. We're the one that stayed home and did the farming and stayed good with mum and dad, but also you're like, we'll learn from your mistakes and things like that. We definitely have a little brother mentality with America, and there is like a common thing eye roll of like, oh, America, when certain things happen. But nowadays, so much of what's happening there, it's here in the next week, because have you heard of the TV show The Goldbergs? It's set in the 80s.
Yeah.
Well, that's not relevant it's in Australia unless you grew up in the 90s, because all that stuff didn't really get here till the 90s. So if you're a 90s kid, The Goldbergs is a 90s show for many people,
really
in the cultural references.
That's fascinating.
But where now it's almost immediate because with the internet and things. So these used to take more time. We had more of a filter even before getting things from the rest of Western civilization, as we're isolated down the bottom of the world here.
Wow.
It's
so globalization.
Yeah,
Our
It's-
culture just keeps the
Yeah.
American Empire, one
For better or
Goldberg
worse.
sitcom at a time.
And it's sped up immensely. Like we've even got young ones with our own Australian accented vocal fries at the end of words. We've got that in our young ones. This new way of talking that's like it's almost like got this British twang on it. It's ridiculous. You want to slap them. It's tough. It's tough to listen to. That's for sure.
Huh. Well, we got 15 minutes left, and I don't want to, if there's anything you wanted to get to, I want to make sure we have time for it.
I did do a quick little bit of scribbling down of things in case I got lost of what I wanted to talk about, but I think I've mostly covered all that.
It is fascinating to me. You know, there's a possibility I might come to Australia early next year. Someone would like me to come out and do a conference, and I've never been to Australia, and there are a lot of people who listen and watch from Australia and New Zealand and Tasmania of all places. You know, I'm starting to get these emails from Tasmania, and it's like, wow, yep. About all I know about is the Tasmanian devil. That's about the only thing I knew about Tasmania. But your description of the country and the culture is fascinating in terms of the pub. But yet, but you're over in Asia too, basically too. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, it's sports is another big thing over here as well. Much like America, but it does appear to be different. It's definitely not on the scale it is over there, and that's also that was another thing I did want to talk about. Now I've brought up elite sports is when I had my 2 days of that flow state I was telling you about last year. I'd basically burnt through every secularized version of which I hadn't heard of or remembered maps of meaning at this time, but the most I come to was mud maps of human potential was what religions were. They were mud maps of human potential was the idea I was playing with back then. And that at the moment, we're seeing like, what would that be at the moment? Who's pushing the boundaries of human potential? And that's elite sports, especially across the board, but in realms of fitness, health, nutrition, and even strategy. There's and then looking for other parallels in the culture along those lines was it's still an interest of mine, but it's definitely much less aggressively against religion, if I'm using that metaphor now, where it was very much as to discount religion, where I kind of the rough anthropology of it was caveman lived in that primitive state, or primitive man lived in that state where they were constantly having to be on alert and have that focus. So you kind of had no choice but to be in a flow state of you would have been fasting not by choice. It was just and so and at the time I was eating ridiculously well. I was even doing a bit of the ketogenic in the aftermath of that. So there was the fasting element to feeling the way I was as well. And so the way I was seeing it was that religions in some respect were just a way of facilitating that way of being moving into civilization. But it's roughly there still as a sketch, but it seems to be fading more and more of that completely secular materialist sort of angle of or view of that. But that was definitely the main metaphor of that I was playing with about a year ago after all that was mud maps to human potential and looking at elite sports as well of where that is at the moment. And it's that I'd say that's something that's changed as well with looking into Christianity and philosophy a lot more was basically learning where the holes were in my own ideas have been a big thing.
Now, how much formal education did you get? Because you're obviously doing a lot of reading. And did you get a college degree?
No, I finished year 12. I went to the end of high school.
Wow.
In Australia, we have the reverse culture of America. We encourage most of our young people to go into full-time work and trades out of high school.
Really?
Possible. And universities more like, if you got the grades, go do it.
Huh. But you're reading all these fancy books.
Yeah. The way I like to see it is, if I'm the dumbest person in Australia, the dumbest person in Australia is reading these books, so we should be all right. I'm just immensely interested in these ideas, and I've just sort of basically I've got to put my money where my mouth is if I want to talk about these things, and and do it. Handle them, or try and get a handle on them. I had a lot more reading to do, and the more I read, the more I realize I did not know and do not know. But it's awesome. Yeah, and I'm definitely self-educated in that sense.
Yeah.
I can thank some good teachers that I had for just getting that little bit of love of learning in me.
Yeah.
And that, but I can say I've put off reading, being a raised a Jehovah's Witness for a long time.
Yeah.
Especially the Bible, man. Like I've got to get a new copy of the Bible. I've got a 70 or 80-year-old King James version. That was my great grandmother's Bible. It's more of an heirloom than something to read. I don't want it to fall apart.
Yeah.
And but it gets self-educated. Dilettante.
Well, that's one of the really interesting things about what Jordan Peterson has done, is that I talked to a lot of people who, they could be wasting their life on computer games and Netflix, and they're reading books, and they're reading Nietzsche and Heidegger, and they're trying to read the Bible, which is not an easy book in and of itself, and amazing we can read it at all. And so, it really, I continue to be impressed at what this Jordan Peterson phenomenon has done. And, all the way out there in Australia, to me, that blows my mind too, that, he's got a European tour, and he's been to Australia, he'll be there again. And, I'd kind of expect him to tour. Canada has fewer people than the state of California. So we're, poor Canada, they got a lot of land, but not a lot of people. So, they're always coming down here.
We've got a lot of land, not a lot of people. Only 24, 25 million, I think we're at now.
Wow.
Over here.
Yeah.
A lot of space.
But you also have a lot of desert.
A lot of desert. There's a bit here.
Yeah.
But, we won't deal well with any giant rise of water over a few centuries. Our cities will be underwater.
Yeah, most of your cities are on the coasts.
Almost all of it. Like this,
really?
Next to nothing.
So the most of the interior is just desert.
Desert and country towns. Yeah.
Country towns.
Yeah.
Oh,
we have what we'd call regional hubs throughout the more interior. There'd be like a country town that at the rest of the peripheral it'll service the peripheral areas, and we'll have them. We have a couple of town cities in the smack bang in the middle of the country, like Alice Springs, and a few of those sort of places. I think they're about 50,000 people. They're not big, but they do what they do.
Wow.
It's an interesting place, the old Australia.
Are you getting much immigration, and where from?
I believe that I think we were taking in 200,000 a year.
Okay.
And that's just our immigration all round policy.
Okay.
Is about 200. And that was, I think in the late 90s, it was only I may be speaking out of turn, but I think it was only in the like under 100,000 20 years ago.
Okay. Is there a lot of illegal immigration? You don't have any land connection?
No, we have what we have in place is what the rest of the world gets called bigoted for having or wanting to implement. We have border patrols. We will turn boats back. We had a lot of tragedies here in the 90s and 2000s of boats coming en masse and sinking with people in them off our shores. And so the government brought in a policy basically of zero tolerance of you will be turned around.
Wow.
And like I always used to sort of joke and like that if you can build the boat, come. Like, build your boat. If you can build your own boat and get here, there's a seat. Have a seat. It's all good. But, and then, like, it's funny because there was this show on Australia, and one of the people on it, and like with real people, is like an Australian reality show. But one of the people on it, she was a Vietnamese migrant, and her dad literally built the boat that got the family to Australia.
Wow.
And I just thought, that's welcome. Like,
hey, if you're going to build the boat yourself, they ought to let you in.
Yes.
You know,
if you can build it, yeah, like, but, you know, it's obviously a joke, but that in Australia at the moment, that's a pretty offensive thing to say, which is kind of sad. Because like one of my best friends, he's a journalist in Sydney with, I won't say with who actually, one of the larger ones.
Okay.
And he wouldn't.
I wouldn't know him anyway, so
no. He wouldn't come on my podcast I had last year, just in case. He didn't say it explicitly, but just in case he sort of, you know, jeopardized what he wanted to do in journalism.
Absolutely.
Because he's one of my best friends, so we can get very casual with, you know, how we're talking, and
sure,
there's we don't have things that are off out of bounds.
Yeah.
And that was another thing I wanted to sort of point out that I've thought about with the Western civilizations. We seem to lack any initiation for young people, and coming into adulthood.
Yes. And
how it's going to manifest itself anyway.
Yes.
We will look at, and in Australia at least, there's at least people who are inclined to smoke pot, right?
Yeah.
We'll have a little there'll be a circle, and it's looking back on the times I did it with my friends growing up and as a young adult. It's a space that we've created where you can say anything, question anything, especially whether you are, like, from the ground up. Am I even real? Like, you know, people smoking pots around, like, am I even real? And from the ground up, like, it's a makeshift mystery school in a sense. And we look, like, a lot of us would look back. All my friends that I'm still friends with today, and now we've all sort of grown up a lot more, they were the ones in that circle, many of them, in this, you know, the sort of circle that we formed and it was at times literally a circle you'd sit around, you know, interesting. And wind down at the end on a Friday afternoon after the week, unload. Yeah. And it's looking back, we didn't have it. We were making do, really. Yep. We didn't have anything to sort of go into from there. Yep. And, you know, what once served a lot of people that way was apprenticeships, but that's now very much a sterilized, employee-employer relationship instead of a master-student relationship as it should be. Yeah. And you're very rare to be an apprentice and finish your trade under less than like 5 people. You'll get passed around to all different tradesmen, which is good if you, like, in giving you a diverse range of ways of doing things. But we lose something in not having that I think in having that strong, you know, master of a craft and the student of the craft bond and relationship going more so, and not just isolated in the trades. You tend to see it a lot in the football teams that is sports teams that are successful. There tends to be, it's generally not a fluke. There tends to be a you know, the coach is a master, or the master players in a team, and they've brought up this. It's the best champion teams are the ragtag teams with a couple of old heads, the young blokes that should have never been there, the guys that have been to 7 or different teams, and they all come together, and there's this. It tends to be a bond that you create in the well, it's a pretty intense environment. You're forging those bonds in the fire of competition. Yeah, and that's also another thing over here in Australia too. Is they're questioning competition. We've had a gradual thing of what we'd call participation trophies. Yeah, brought in where everyone gets a ribbon, and you know, they stop scoring certain kids' sports games under a certain age, and now they're even creating weight divisions for kids playing football, so the little kids don't get smashed by the big kids or something. And it's I don't know. For me, it's just a bit too much. It's a bit bubble wrap in regards to doing all that, and this is a bit silly.
Wow, that's interesting. Well, thank you so much, Jason.
No,
I really appreciate you, reaching out and signing up. And
thank you. No, thanks for all your stuff, mate.
part of me is just really surprised. I mean, my videos really are just thinking out loud for the most part. It's
Yep.
helpful for me to have people listen and comment and give feedback because, like you say, you have ideas, and sometimes, who can you talk to about these things? And just having the ideas in your head all by yourself, well, that's no fun. And so learning from each other. So
Yeah, no, big time. That's one of the best things that the internet's done for us.
yeah,
There's plenty wrong plenty that's gone wrong with it, but
yeah,
there's that it's definitely helped satiate my appetite for new information. That's for sure.
Well, thank you. And I'll send you a copy of this, and then we can decide what we want to do with it.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank
Cheers,
you,
mate.
Jason. Bye-bye.